It began as a revelation no one was ever meant to hear, buried deep within the final therapy sessions of a princess who had long since become both legend and warning. When a royal historian quietly confirmed the existence of Diana's last recorded reflections, the palace did not deny it, they simply refused to speak. And in that silence, one name echoed louder than ever: Camilla. What Diana allegedly said in those final moments was not just emotional, it was incendiary, threatening to reopen wounds the monarchy had spent decades trying to seal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What makes this moment so unsettling is not simply the idea that Diana spoke freely in those sessions, it is the timing of their resurfacing. The quiet validation from a historian, known for careful words, and the immediate retreat into silence from a palace that has in the past been quick to correct even the smallest rumor. Reports suggest that these recordings were long protected, tucked away not only out of respect for Diana's privacy, but also out of concern for the consequences they might unleash. And now, as whispers turn into cautious confirmations, attention is once again drawn back to Diana's final years, marked by emotional strain, isolation, and a growing sense that her voice was being contained. Those familiar with her personal journey have begun revisiting fragments of interviews, letters, and now these alleged tapes, searching for patterns that were once overlooked. At the center of it all, one figure keeps returning, not just as part of a past conflict, but as a symbol of something deeper that Diana struggled to articulate. Camilla's presence in these reflections, as described by those who have examined the material, is not distant or incidental. It is constant, woven into Diana's understanding of her own position within the royal structure. Some insiders whisper that what Diana expressed was not merely resentment, but a profound awareness of how her role was shifting in ways she could neither control nor fully confront. And as speculation grows, so too does the sense that these recordings could challenge the carefully reconstructed narrative that followed her passing. Because if Diana's words reveal a truth that diverges from what the public has come to accept, then the implications stretch far beyond personal memory. They begin to touch the very framework of how this chapter of royal history has been preserved. But what made these recordings truly unsettling wasn't just their existence, it was what Diana was reportedly preparing to reveal about the woman who would one day become queen. Locked away for decades, these recordings were never intended for public ears, sessions described by insiders as raw, unfiltered, and emotionally devastating. Diana, stripped of royal protocol, spoke not as a princess, but as a woman unraveling under pressure. And according to those now revisiting the material, her words about Camilla were not measured. They were deeply personal, even haunting. What she expressed wasn't just pain, it hinted at something far more complex, something the palace may have feared all along. Reports suggest these sessions took place during the most volatile period of her marriage, when the distance between public image and private reality had grown impossible to contain. In those moments, free from the constraints of expectation, Diana is believed to have spoken with a clarity that was both liberating and dangerous, as though she understood that what she was saying could never be publicly acknowledged without consequences. Those familiar with the structure of these recordings describe a pattern: waves of emotion rising and falling, moments of quiet reflection suddenly breaking into sharp realizations, as if she were piecing together a truth she had long been forced to ignore. And within that truth, one presence remained constant, not simply as a rival, but as something more deeply embedded in the fabric of her experience. Camilla, as referenced in these accounts, was not portrayed as a distant figure operating in the background, but as a symbol of a system Diana felt she could neither escape nor confront directly. Insiders whisper that Diana's words carried an unsettling duality. On one hand, there was undeniable hurt, the kind that comes from betrayal that cannot be publicly named. And on the other, There was an almost analytical awareness of how her position within the royal structure was shifting in real time. It is this contrast that has drawn historians back to these recordings, not simply to revisit the emotional weight of her story, but to question whether these reflections reveal something that had been carefully overlooked. Some interpretations suggest that Diana was not only processing her personal struggles, but also beginning to understand the broader dynamics at play. Dynamics that extended far beyond individual relationships and into the very mechanisms of the institution itself. This is where the narrative becomes increasingly unsettling, because if these recordings contain even fragments of that realization, then they challenge the simplified version of events that has been accepted for years. Why were these tapes kept hidden for so long? And why are they emerging now, at a time when the monarchy faces renewed scrutiny from a generation less willing to accept silence? As an answer, the timing feels deliberate to some, coincidental to others, but impossible to ignore. And as historians continue to examine the layers within Diana's words, a new tension begins to take shape, not just about what she felt, but about what she understood. Because beneath the emotion, beneath the vulnerability, there appears to be something else entirely. Something that suggests Diana may have been trying to articulate a deeper truth before it was too late. Yet the deeper experts dig into these recordings, the clearer it becomes Diana wasn't just recounting the past, she was warning about the future. For years, the story was simplified into a love triangle: Diana, Charles, and Camilla. But these tapes suggest something far more layered, far more unsettling. Diana's alleged words paint a picture not of rivalry alone, but of a quiet battle for influence, identity, and survival within the monarchy itself. And if her perspective is to be believed, Camilla's role was not passive, it was pivotal. What begins to emerge from these accounts is not a single emotional conflict, but a slow, calculated shift that Diana felt happening around her, one she could sense but struggled to fully articulate at the time. Reports suggest that in these sessions, she spoke not just about heartbreak, but about displacement, about the feeling that her position, once secure, was gradually being redefined in ways that left her increasingly isolated. It was not loud, not obvious, but subtle, almost invisible, like a quiet rearrangement happening behind closed doors. Those who have studied these interpretations closely argue that Diana's reflections point towards something deeper than personal betrayal. They hint at a transformation within the monarchy itself, a recalibration of priorities where emotional connection was secondary to stability, where perception was carefully managed, and where roles could be reshaped without explanation. Within that framework, Camilla's presence takes on a different meaning, not merely as an individual, but as a symbol of that shift, representing a continuity that Diana felt excluded from. Insiders whisper that Diana became acutely aware of this contrast, recognizing that while she was celebrated publicly, her influence privately was becoming increasingly fragile. This duality, the gap between image and reality, is what gives her alleged words their unsettling weight. Because if she truly believed she was being positioned out of the center, then the narrative we have long accepted begins to fracture. Historians remain divided, some suggesting that these interpretations reflect a deeply emotional state shaped by pressure and isolation, while others argue that they reveal an intuitive understanding of dynamics that were never openly acknowledged. And as this debate intensifies, attention inevitably turns to the timeline of Charles and Camilla's relationship, with renewed scrutiny placed on moments that were once dismissed or downplayed. The question is no longer just what happened, but how it happened, and whether the version presented to the public was ever complete. What makes this moment particularly striking is the shift in public reaction. A new generation, less tied to traditional narratives, is beginning to engage with these revelations in a different way, questioning assumptions and re-examining long-held beliefs. Diana's voice, once filtered through interviews and headlines, now feels more immediate, more direct. as though it is cutting through layers that had previously obscured it. And with each new interpretation, the sense grows that this story was never as simple as it seemed. It was not just about love lost or rivalry endured, it was about power, positioning, and the quiet forces that shape even the most visible lives. But as the narrative begins to shift, one question grows impossible to ignore: why were these insights kept hidden for so long? The monarchy has always mastered the art of silence, but this time, that silence feels heavier, more deliberate. No statements, no clarifications, just a carefully maintained distance from a story that refuses to fade. Insiders suggest this isn't avoidance, it's strategy. Because acknowledging Diana's final words could mean reopening a chapter the palace has spent years rewriting. What makes this silence so striking is not its presence, but its precision. It is measured, controlled, almost rehearsed, as though every possible response has been considered and ultimately withheld. Reports suggest that within royal circles, the reappearance of these recordings has not gone unnoticed, but rather quietly dissected, weighed against the risks of engagement versus the power of restraint. And historically, restraint has often won. This is an institution that has survived not by reacting, but by enduring, by allowing storms to pass without acknowledgement, trusting that time will dull even the sharpest revelations. Yet this moment feels different, because the voice at the center of it is not just any voice, it is Diana's, and her resonance has never truly faded. Those familiar with previous crises note a pattern. When faced with uncomfortable truths, the palace often retreats into a carefully constructed stillness, allowing speculation to exhaust itself. But insiders whisper that behind that stillness, conversations are anything but quiet. There is said to be a growing awareness of the delicate balance at stake, particularly when it comes to Camilla's position. As queen, her image has been shaped over years of gradual acceptance, a slow transformation from controversy to quiet legitimacy. And now, with these alleged reflections resurfacing, there is a risk, subtle but undeniable, that old perceptions could begin to resurface as well. Not in dramatic waves, but in quiet shifts, in questions that linger longer than before. Media outlets, once cautious about revisiting Diana-era tensions, are beginning to tread that ground again, carefully, deliberately, as though testing how far the conversation can go. Some interpretations remain restrained, focusing on the historical context, while others lean into the emotional weight of what Diana may have expressed. And with each retelling, the silence from the palace becomes more noticeable, more charged. Because silence, in this context, is not empty, it is filled with implication. It invites speculation, fuels curiosity, and, perhaps most significantly, allows Diana's voice to occupy the space unchallenged. This is where the tension begins to deepen. Because if the palace chooses not to respond, then the narrative is left to evolve on its own, shaped by historians, commentators, and a public increasingly willing to question what it once accepted without hesitation. And somewhere within that evolving narrative lies the possibility that Diana's words, long hidden, carefully contained, may begin to redefine not just the past, but the present as well. And while the palace remains quiet, the public is beginning to listen more closely than ever before to a voice they thought had been lost forever. As whispers turn into headlines, the public response has been anything but quiet. Social platforms, documentaries, and historians are all circling the same question: did Diana try to tell us something we weren't ready to hear? The emotional weight of her legacy is colliding with a modern audience that views the monarchy through a far more critical lens. And suddenly those final words feel less like history and more like unfinished truth. What is unfolding now is not just renewed interest, but a shift in tone, one that feels sharper, more questioning, less willing to accept carefully shaped narratives without hesitation. Reports suggest that conversations once confined to documentaries and late-night debates are now spreading across digital spaces at an unprecedented pace, drawing in voices from across generations, each bringing their own interpretation to Diana's story. Younger audiences, in particular, are approaching these revelations without the emotional distance that once softened public reaction. They are not just revisiting Diana as a tragic figure, but as someone whose experiences may hold relevance even now, as the institution she once struggled within continues to evolve. And within these discussions, one theme keeps resurfacing: the idea that Diana may have been trying to express something that was never fully understood at the time. Archival interviews, once viewed as isolated moments, are being re-examined with new context, their meaning shifting as they are placed alongside these alleged recordings. Phrases that once seemed emotional now feel deliberate. Silences that were once overlooked now feel loaded with implication. It is this reinterpretation that gives the current moment its intensity, because it suggests that the story may not have changed, but the way it is being heard has. Media outlets, sensing this shift, are cautiously stepping back into territory they had long considered settled, revisiting timelines, reanalyzing key moments, and exploring perspectives that were previously set aside. Some approach it with restraint, framing it as historical reflection, while others lean into the possibility that these revelations could reshape public understanding of the monarchy itself. And at the center of it all remains the question of Camilla, her role, her image, and how these resurfacing narratives might influence the way she is perceived today. The contrast is striking. On one side, a carefully established sense of stability and acceptance. On the other, a resurgence of unresolved emotion tied to a figure who continues to command deep public sympathy. This tension is not explosive, not immediate, but it is persistent, quietly building as more voices join the conversation. Because Diana's presence in public consciousness has never truly faded, it has simply transformed, adapting to each new generation that encounters her story. And now, with these alleged final reflections entering the discourse, that presence feels more immediate than ever, as though her voice has found a new way to be heard. But beneath the public reaction lies a deeper tension, because if Diana's words hold even a fraction of truth, their implications could reach far beyond the past. Diana's story was never just about her life, it was about what she represented, and what she challenged. And now, decades later, her voice is once again shaping the narrative from beyond the grave. The resurfacing of these therapy tapes doesn't just revisit old wounds, it redefines them. Because in those final reflections, there may be truths the monarchy can no longer contain. What gives this moment its intensity is not simply the content of what she may have said, but the enduring power of who she was, a figure who transformed public expectation, who blurred the line between royalty and humanity, and who forced an institution built on distance to confront emotion in its rawest form. Reports suggest that even now, Diana's influence continues to ripple through every layer of royal perception, shaping how audiences interpret not only the past, but the present. As well, her voice, once mediated through interviews and carefully managed appearances, now feels unfiltered, immediate, as though it has bypassed the structures that once controlled it. And that shift carries weight. Because when a voice like Diana's re-emerges, it does not simply add to the narrative, it reshapes it, forcing every existing interpretation to be reconsidered in light of what might have been left unsaid. Historians remain divided, some urging caution, emphasizing the emotional context of those final years, while others argue that these reflections may offer insight into dynamics that were never publicly acknowledged. And within that debate lies a deeper tension, because the implications extend beyond Diana herself. They reach into the present, into how figures like Camilla are understood within the evolving story of the monarchy. Over time, public perception has shifted, softened, adapted. But with these alleged revelations, there is a subtle recalibration taking place, one that does not erase the present, but complicates it. It introduces new questions, new uncertainties, and a renewed awareness of the past that had been carefully settled. The monarchy, as it stands today, is caught within this tension, balancing the need to preserve continuity with the growing demand for transparency. It is a delicate position, one that has been navigated before, but perhaps never with a voice as enduring as Diana's re-entering the conversation. Because her story has never truly ended, it has simply evolved, adapting to each generation that encounters it, revealing new layers with each retelling. And now, with these tapes surfacing, that evolution feels accelerated, as though the narrative itself is shifting in real time. What once seemed distant now feels immediate. What once felt resolved now feels uncertain. And within that uncertainty lies the possibility that Diana's story is not just being remembered, it is still being written. And as her words continue to echo through time, one thing becomes undeniable: some truths, no matter how deeply buried, are never meant to stay hidden. For the historian who brought these recordings back into the light, the decision was never simple. To reveal is to disrupt. To stay silent is to preserve. But when dealing with a figure like Diana, whose life was already shaped by what was hidden and what was shown, the line between truth and responsibility becomes dangerously thin. And now, that choice is under scrutiny. What began as a careful examination of archived material has transformed into something far more consequential, a moment where history itself feels unstable, as though it is being rewritten not by new facts, but by the courage to revisit what was once buried. Reports suggest that the historian did not act impulsively, but with measured intent, aware that even a subtle confirmation could ignite a global conversation. And it did. Because in the world of royal narratives, historians are not just observers, they are gatekeepers, shaping the lens through which the past is understood. The ethical weight of that role becomes almost unbearable when the subject is as emotionally charged as Diana, a figure whose story has always existed between public fascination and private suffering. Insiders whisper that the pressure surrounding this revelation has intensified, with media outlets, commentators, and audiences all demanding more clarity, more context, more access to what remains hidden. Yet with every call for transparency comes an equally powerful argument for restraint. Should deeply personal reflections, spoken in moments of vulnerability, be brought into the public domain decades later? Or does the passage of time transform them into something else entirely, historical artifacts that belong not just to memory, but to collective understanding? This tension is what now surrounds the historian's decision, creating a quiet but persistent debate that extends far beyond the recordings themselves. Because what is truly at stake is not just what Diana said, but how her words are interpreted, framed, and ultimately remembered. Some argue that without full context, fragments of her reflections risk being misunderstood, shaped by modern perspectives that may not fully grasp the emotional reality she lived through. Others believe that withholding such material only perpetuates a controlled narrative, one that denies the complexity of her experience. And as this debate unfolds, the historian's role becomes even more significant, not just as a source of information, but as a figure capable of reigniting a story that has never fully settled. Because in the end, it may not just be about what Diana said, but about who decides how her story is told. Long after the headlines fade and the debates quiet down, one truth remains: Diana's voice still lingers. Not just in memory, but in the questions she left behind. Questions about love, betrayal, and the cost of silence within one of the world's most powerful institutions. And perhaps most haunting of all, whether the truth was always there, waiting for the right moment to be heard. What makes her legacy so enduring is not just the events that defined her life, but the emotional imprint she left on those who continue to revisit her story. Each new revelation does not replace the past, it adds to it, layering new meaning onto moments that once seemed fully understood. Reports suggest that this is why public fascination has never truly faded, because Diana's story resists closure. It evolves, adapts, and re-emerges in ways that feel both familiar and unsettlingly new. The questions surrounding her relationship with Camilla remain part of that unresolved narrative, not because they lack answers, but because the answers themselves continue to shift, depending on who is telling the story and how it is being heard. And within the monarchy, that shifting perception creates a quiet tension and ongoing challenge to balance tradition with a growing demand for openness. Because the more Diana's voice is revisited, the harder it becomes to maintain a version of history that feels complete. This is what gives her legacy its unique power. It is not fixed, not confined to a single interpretation, but constantly evolving, shaped by each generation that engages with it. And in that evolution lies something both compelling and unsettling: the realization that some stories are never truly finished. They remain in motion, carried forward by memory, by curiosity, and by the enduring human need to understand what was left unsaid. Diana's voice even now continues to shape that search, guiding it in ways that feel almost intentional, as though her story is still unfolding long after her time. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are not the ones that end, but the ones that refuse to. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.